Hey everybody, good evening. We're here live on a Tuesday evening, and we've got a guest that we had on long time ago, not live though. We did a recorded interview back in the day when I was trying to get my feet wet with interviewing people, and I think I maybe did Mickey Anamentadu first, and then eventually I had a interview with Dewey. So it's been a long time. I haven't talked to Dewey in a while. We've emailed here or there, and he's been a regular on CAF for a very, very long time. So for those of you who've never met him before, I'm going to introduce you all to Dewey right now. And welcome to the show, Dewey.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's you were one of the early guinea pigs on the channel before there even really was a channel. So, I mean, I don't think I even had the YouTube stuff set up when I decided we would start doing some recordings and chat with collectors, and that was like 2019 or so. So it was very early on.
That was nice to be back.
Exactly. So we we have things that we can rehash, and then also talk about some stuff that is new with you. I think you co-authoring a book that's coming out sometime this summer, and I know we didn't talk about that. I just hopped over to Amazon and I saw that you had that Marshall Rogers book coming out. And obviously, you've done a lot of writing in your time, but let's get started. Yeah, Larry Wilson's in the chat. He's he is a fellow guinea pig as well. He was one of the early people I interviewed too. But we like to get things started usually with our interviews, just to kind of talk about your origins in the hobby. Whether most of our stories typically begin with comics, of course. I think that's the common thread for many of us. But how your interest in comics led to collecting and picking up original art.
Sure. Yeah. Of course, I read comics when I was a kid. In fact, I started out my first day in seventh grade. I got into a fight with the kids. Actually, the only fight I've ever gotten into, but it turned out that the guy that I was defending this friend of mine. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but it turned out that this guy that I fought with, he and I became friends, and he was a comic collector, and so I'd go over to his house, and in his detached garage out behind the house, he had boxes of comics. And that's where I got my Silver Surfer #1, for example, was from this guy, which I kept until just last year. I gave it to my son finally. But that's where it got started, was back when I was 12. And then, like a lot of people, it went on a hiatus there at some point when I discovered girls. And then after we had kids, back in late 80s, early 90s, their interest in reading got me interested in comics again.
Mm-hmm.
And I started going to Heroes Con about 1993. And then about 96, 97, going to Heroes Con, I met Nathan Massengill. He was an inker at the time on Harris Comics Vampirella. And super nice guy. He and I, hit it off, and he had pages there from his stories that he had inked. And I was a big Vampirella fan from the Warren days years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought some pages from him, and that's how I got started. Was buying Vampirella stuff.
Wow. And so you hadn't really any experience with buying art before that, but just from the friendship and seeing what he had available for sale, that's where it got started. So if that was the first stuff that you picked up, so you're picking up published work first, which is isn't usually, I would say that's the common starting point for most collectors. Usually it's something that's more getting a sketch from somebody at a show, or whatnot. But where do you go from there? I mean, after you picked up some of Massengill's pieces, what was maybe your second purchase?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll admit that for the first 4 or 5 years or whatever it was that I was going to Heroes Con there in the 90s, I spent all of my time in the comics dealer section. There may have been artists there, but I had no idea. So it wasn't really until 97 that I sort of even became aware of the art angle. But people have different philosophies, I think, when it comes to collecting, and you've got collectors out there who have deep pockets and buy art and never sell it. It just always it comes in but never goes out.
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have deep pockets, and so I've always had situations in which either because I needed the money in order to buy something else, or because my interest changed, I would sell artwork too sometimes. So like those Vampirella pages that I bought early on that Nathan Mathengill had inked, I eventually sold in order to buy something else.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I was fortunate. My wife was from up in Ohio and lived not far from where Mike Berkey does. And so I became aware of Mike Berkey. And one of those times when I was up visiting my wife, I called Mike and said, "Hey, could I stop by?" So I stopped by his house, and he brought out, he showed me his filing drawers with the Spider-Man pages in it and all that were, and that was fascinating. I mean, I love that stuff, but I realized it was out of my reach.
Mm-hmm.
But he also had this cardboard box of pages, just random pages of art. And he let me go through there, and I picked out several things, and that's, kind of how I branched out. But I probably had to sell the Vampirella stuff in order to afford it. So.
Well, we have a similar, beginning story too, because Mike Berkey was the guy that, at least first art get together or wherever, a place where I went to hang out with other collectors for the first time was thanks to Mike. So it was probably at the same house that he had back in the day in like 90. For me, it was 97, around that period. But yeah, many collectors' origin stories, at least if you lived in the Midwest, start or end with Mike Berkey one way or another. But that's still pretty cool. I mean, you see, that's funny because I guess you found out about Mike through, at the time, did he even have a website? I mean, was he advertising in the Buyer's Guide? How did you know he was in Ohio?
It was probably the Buyer's Guide. I was a subscriber to the Comic Buyer's Guide for years, and it was probably through something like that. And the fact that he was, I looked it up on a map and realized, hey, wow, he's like 45 minutes away from where my wife's family is. And so it turned out to be a lot of fun. And actually, of the pages, well, I take that back. I probably don't have anything that I bought from Mike at the time, but a friend of mine, Aaron Sultan, gifted me a page that he also got from Mike, and I still have that page. In fact, it's one of the ones that is hanging up on my wall, and then I put in the list of ones to show. It's a Green Lantern page that Jack Sparling did in issue 62. Kane had been doing a long run, and then Sparling sort of guest starred for one or two issues, and it's a ring charging page from the Green Lantern 62 with the oath and all that. So it's a prized possession of mine, and that was a gift from Aaron Sultan for one birthday or Christmas many years ago. So it hangs up on my wall behind me.
And we're looking at the art right now.
Yeah, I always loved Green Lantern. When I was a kid, Green Lantern was the hero that I wanted to be, because you didn't have to be born on Krypton. You didn't have to be bitten by a radioactive spider. All you needed was the ring. And if you had the ring, you could do anything. And so, he was the one I really enjoyed the most as a kid. So it was great to be able to get the page, and it's a prized possession of mine.
Well, it's a very nice gift. Obviously, I think most Green Lantern collectors want an oath page. There's only so many of them. I mean, there's a lot of them, but at the end of the day, there's a lot more collectors than there are oath pages. So to have,
typically there was maybe one per issue, and so
right, exactly.
I felt very, very fortunate that Aaron got it and gifted it to me. He got it from Berkey too. Berkey at one time had the whole story. So
yeah, we say that a lot. Berkey had a whole story, and then he broke it up or whatever. I know I've picked up pages from him same way, right? He has a knack for getting a lot of kind of interesting pieces that other dealers don't get, especially early on. But so after so a trip to Berkey's, going to Heroes. I mean, was Heroes pretty much your only show that you went to where you were meeting artists, or how did because how does that all end up leading into a career in writing about comic artists too? I mean, that's really where I wanted to go to next.
Well, the short answer to your question is yes. I primarily went to Heroes.
Hmm.
I did go to MegaCon occasionally because I had family down in Florida, but it was Heroes pretty much every year starting in 1993. But it was then at late 90s, I guess 98, 99, that I was there and I met George and Dorothy Tusca.
Hmm.
And I always enjoyed. I mean, that's my era of artwork, right? Late 60s, early 70s. That's my sweet spot. And George and Dorothy were just two of the sweetest people you'd ever want to meet. I mean, and they're hanging out with Dick Giordano and Pat Bastien, and they're hanging out with Gene and Adrian Colin, and they're all right in there together, right? And so they were just wonderful people, and we just struck up a friendship there, and as did Aaron Sultan, my friend and I. And so after knowing them for a few years, we thought, wow, somebody really should write a book about George. I mean, he's a great guy. He's got all these stories to tell, and it'd be nice to for somebody to capture that. And
Hmm.
so we put together a 32-page proposal that we took to John Morrow, the publisher of Two Morrows Publishing,
Hmm.
who just happens to live, not too far from where I do. And we sat down with him in his living room and showed him the proposal and talked through with him what we wanted to do. And he took a leap of faith because Aaron and I had never written anything before, but he gave us the green light, and that was the first book that we did, was the book on George. And it's still one of my favorites. It's got a lot of rough spots, and we learned a lot of things in the course of doing the book that made the next one better. But it was a blast. We had a lot of fun, putting it together. And I remain friends with the Tusca family, even though George and his wife passed away years ago. But they're just great folks, and I've always been a fan of George's artwork. I would say probably close to half of the artwork in my collection is by George. So
Okay. Yeah, I like George's stuff too. I mean, I had a hard time finding, Marvel related artwork to buy from him, of course, but I have managed to pick up a few pages over the last couple of years, an Iron Man page, for instance. So yeah, he had an interesting style, and I think depending on the inker, it made it fantastic, or stuff that I was like, it was okay, but the Tusca book came out in 2005, maybe four.
2005, yeah.
Okay, 2005. So, did you write for any of the other, because you've written for Alter Ego, you've written, gosh, I know I wrote down a list somewhere, but Rough Stuff, and I forget the other, I think there were two other
Yeah, I did
periodicals
one
too.
piece for the Jack Kirby Collector, and then I've written mostly for Back Issue magazine.
And Back Issue. Okay. So when did that start, though? Was that pre-Tusca book or after?
That was after. The Tusca book was sort of my introduction into Two Morrows, and then after that, I became aware of some of those other opportunities, and actually got into Back Issue fairly early on. I forget what the very first issue I was in, but I want to say it was maybe 12 or 13 or something like that, and now they're on 100 something. So I've all total I've written over 50 articles for Two Morrows in one magazine or another.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a great relationship. I really love working with him. John Morrow is a great publisher, and Michael Urie and Roy Thomas are both great editors, and so it's terrific, being able to work with him. And of course, they've Michael's passed that baton on to Roger Ashe and Ed Cato, and I'm enjoying working with both of them as well. So.
Well, so it's gotten you a little bit of notoriety. You get press passes when you go to Heroes and any of the shows these days.
That is one of the perks, yeah, is being able to do that, yeah, and frankly, it's also meeting some really fascinating people. They're people that I probably otherwise would never have met, and so being able to write kind of opened up doors, in addition to, I love writing, so it's a lot of fun. But
well, tell us something about Tusca that we may not know. I mean, it's clearly, if you got pretty close with them while they were with us, if you're still tight with the family these days. But the one thing I really enjoy is getting to know stories about the creators, especially those who we can't speak to today. And George had a long career. So, I mean, I guess tell us a little bit about George and your experience with him.
George was just a wonderful guy. You know, he was one of those greatest generation people, and he had hearing difficulties that started back when he was like 8 years old, and so he did not hear well, and it affected his speech also. So there were times when you might go to him at a convention, and he wouldn't necessarily say a whole lot. He would like to talk to you. He loved the interaction with fans, but sometimes that talking, especially in a loud convention, was tough to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd go visit him at his house, and he'd talk up a storm. It was like somebody had been holding him back or something, and he would just talk like crazy. So that was fun, and it offered an avenue to kind of get to know him. And he had his own. By the time he and Dorothy retired, he had his own separate bedroom that he used as a study, and a studio really, and that's where he would sit and draw. And there was a closet in that studio room that was like the sacred closet. And if you were, if everything was going well with the visit and all that, and George was okay with it, he'd give you permission to go look in the closet. And that closet was just full of treasures. I mean, there were just some amazing things in there. One of the things I found in there is one of the other pieces that I put on the list, and that was a unpublished Sunday pencil newspaper strip from the world's greatest superheroes. With George was the artist that they selected to do that series back in 1978, and apparently as part of the run up to that, they gave George some scripts from the early strips and asked him to do kind of like a tryout. And so this is a tryout Sunday that he did from that early storyline that involved not just Superman, but really basically the JLA. It included Flash and Aquaman and Wonder Woman and ultimately Batman too. So, but it was to me, that was a treasure. I've always loved that strip, and that's one of the things that I found in his closet. So that was.
So is the closet only filled with artwork? Or
oh
was
yeah,
there...
yeah. The closet was where he stored all of his artwork, and the funny part about it was, I knew George for years, and I would say maybe, I don't remember the exact time. I wish I'd written it down, but it was sometime, I want to say 2010, maybe 2012, in that neighborhood. I mean, George got back a complete Iron Man story from Marvel Comics. I mean, they were still uncovering stuff, as late as that, and sending it to him. This would have been a story he would have drawn back in the late 70s, probably.
Right.
It was always the closet was always a blast to be able to go in there and rummage around and see what you could find. So
that's interesting that even at that date, artwork from 20 years prior, or well, more than that, we're getting returned to him. I would have thought most of that work would have already left the Marvel offices or the warehouse or whatever you want to consider it, where they stored the artwork. Certainly by the early 90s, we would have thought that it would all have been shipped out and returned.
I would have thought so too. And granted, it didn't happen very often, but it did happen occasionally. And it's astounding, in my opinion, that somebody didn't just keep it, right? I mean, because as you said, it was past that time period where they were really making a concerted effort to return artwork that had been stored up. And I'm surprised that they sent it back, but they did. And I may have misspoken. I think it may have been missing the splash, but it had the other, whatever it was, 17 pages or 20 pages or whatever it was at the time. The rest of it was there. I think he ended up recreating the splash. But there was another time too when they sent him back 2 pages, again, Iron Man pages from issue, I want to say it was 46. It was one of the Guardsman issues, and I always loved those issues. And George made photocopies of them to send them to me in the mail so I could see what they look like. But along with it came a note saying, I've decided to color these. and I talked to Mike Gartland, who was the other guy who Aaron and I worked on the book together. And, Mike said, it's what he wants to do, right? I mean, so, let him have his fun, which we did. So, The irony is, I don't think most people know this, but you've probably seen that artwork available on CAF or on eBay or both, and wondered who colored it. But it's George who colored it.
Let's
It's
see who
his
did it.
coloring.
I know he did I mean, what did he color it with? Colored pencils, or did he actually use?
Watercolors.
He did use watercolor. Okay,
Yeah.
because I remember a lot of the convention sketches that he did later in life. At least the ones that I would see when I would see him at a show were usually done in a colored pencil or something like that.
Yeah, because it was quicker, I think. But
Mhm.
but when he had the time, he loved to do watercolor painting. In fact, he had all kinds of paintings hanging up around his house that had nothing to do with comic books. He just enjoyed. He loved art. You know, he always said he felt really blessed that he was able to do something for a living that he enjoyed so much. So.
Well, I mean, again, he had a long run, and I think many comic artists have I don't know, I want to say passions in other areas of painting, right? It's not all or artwork creating. They're not always want to just make comic book artwork for the rest of their lives. So that's cool. So you got to see some of his narrative artwork pieces hanging around the house.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. I mean, he really, and you didn't. Not everybody liked his comic book style. I did. It was what I grew up on, right? So it resonated with me. But he was really quite a gifted artist in general. Ironically, his son is also an artist and is equally good at it. And it's not one of the pieces I included, but I have a small science fiction piece.
Oh, dude, your internet's getting there. You're back. I think you're back. Your internet was.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No problem. Well, that's awesome. I mean, and it all led to you getting to do a book with Tomorrows, and it's still out there. I actually put a link in the show description for people who were curious about, the books that are out there that you've directly worked on, and anybody who goes down into the description can find that and head over to Amazon and check out what books are still out there through their website. And there's probably other places. You probably still buy them through Tomorrow's website, right?
Well, unfortunately, everything except the Mike Grell book is now out of print.
Oh, that's too bad.
But truthfully, I have some print copies that I stuck back. So if anybody really wants one, just have them reach out to me.
Through your CAF gallery.
Yeah.
Well, that is in the show in the description as well. So anybody who who can't get their fix any of the books directly from either Amazon or Tomorrow's, you can email Dewey directly then.
Yeah, be glad to help.
Yep. Marcus says PDFs now.
Yeah, that's all you can get off of Tomorrow's right now. But I still have hard copies. I sort of hoarded them there for a while. So
no worries there. So after Tusca, let me see. I know I kind of tried putting everything in order. I know you worked on the Severin book and the Trimpe book and then the Grell book, but Severin, I mean, tell me a bit about Marie. I mean, she's somebody who, it's funny, she was in the bullpen for years. She tutored and mentored a lot of creators like Trimpe, who you also wrote the book for after Marie's. But she's somebody who if you're like looking for her work, it's hard to find like a definitive style here. You could look at it and say that's Marie's work. But I mean, or would you characterize it differently than I just did?
Well, I think it's like any artist, right? If they're a favorite of yours and you get to looking at them over and over and over again,
you can pick it out.
More recognizable. Yeah.
Yeah.
But truthfully, the output that Marie generated in terms of comic book artwork is relatively small. She worked on the Hulk for a little bit. She worked on Doctor Strange for a little bit. She worked on Submariner for a little bit. She did like Not Brand X, but a lot of her work was behind the scenes, either in coloring or in production or art direction. From like the late 1960s to early 70s, she was technically the art director at Marvel and designed basically every cover they did.
I was going to say she did a lot of cover roughs and things. I've seen those for sale, periodically, like every year, a few of those pieces come up, and I didn't know that. I knew that she, like you said, she was doing art direction, but you always think of Romita Senior as the only one during that period who was doing cover roughs or even some finished work on covers. But you didn't hear Marie's name too often.
Yeah, she used to put the covers from the recent comics up on the wall behind her at her art desk. so she could look around and see, what type of images they had used over the course of the last couple of months, so they wouldn't repeat. She was very concerned about making sure they didn't repeat the same colors or same scenes. She wanted it to look very distinctive, because even back then, I guess maybe you're probably getting the beginnings maybe of the comic shop stuff, but a lot of it was still newsstand, right? And so it needed to look different on the newsstand to make sure that somebody was going to pick it up. And she was very conscious of that, and consequently, she had a tremendous influence on what Marvel Comics looked like, at least on the cover, for those probably 3 or 4 years in that time period, right at the turn of the decade.
Interesting. Well, David Wetzel and Rich both said that they loved her not friend Eck work. I mean, she could have worked for Mad, right? The work that she had, that she just had a really fun style that really took on the characterizations of the Marvel characters that she was working on, and made them fun, right? I mean, a lot like Sergio Aragones would do with with characters and whatnot. It's just engaging, and she had that down incredibly well.
She did. She was a sweetheart. She really was, and she loved the book. She helped a lot in putting it together, but then she would carry it around with her at the nursing home and show it to anybody that would pay her any attention. So it was great.
When Larry Wilson says for him, the Tales to Astonish 100 has Marvel's greatest choreographed fight sequence, thanks to Marie. And Tony said that she has a very unique way of illustrating the Hulk. And honestly, there was a friend of mine, Carl, in his collection, he added a Fantastic Four page that was drawn by Marie that just is unbelievable. I mean, when I saw it, I was so jealous that he got it, because it was they weren't in costume. It was like a wintry scene or something. They're dressed with their jackets on, and it's just absolutely stunning. I think it was Synod Inks too, which always helped. But when you learned it was Marie, you're like, doggone, man. If I don't have an example from Marie, that would have been the one that I would have wanted. So yeah, she was incredibly talented.
Yes, Rich said she really was. She was a natural. She just she grew up in an artistic family, and she was very gifted.
And our friend Newell, who goes by the handle Stingray, said that Marie's work on Submariner was great, especially the first appearance of Stingray. So Newell has a debt of gratitude there as well. What else? Colin even just mentioned that she got named to the Society of Illustrators Hall of Fame.
I saw that. Yeah, I did. I'm hoping to get up for the ceremony in October, I think it is. So.
Oh, fantastic. Let's see. And Larry says her Silver Age sketch cards are the best. I didn't realize.
Oh, yeah, she did a great job on those.
I'm going to have to go back and look. I mean, you're right. Now that I'm thinking about it, I guess I have seen some of her sketch cards out there. There has to be some on CAF.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I would be certain.
Interesting. So, I mean, for the book that you did on her, which came out a few years after, the Tusca book. I mean, what kind of how did you have to get to know her? Or how did you do most of your research then for her? Did you interview other artists that worked with her?
Yes. The Marie book includes interviews with people like Roy Thomas, of course, that she worked with, and interview with her brother John that Aaron did, and then we did a series of interviews with other women that either knew her or had worked with her, including people like Ramona Fraden, Linda Fite. Oh shoot, now her name's going to escape me. I hate it when that happens. But anyway, it's a host of other women that she worked with. Oh, of course, Flo Steinberg, right? Flo was just a wonderful lady. That's one of those things that was one of the best side effects of writing the books. It's all these wonderful people that you get to meet. And I got to become friends then with Flo Steinberg, and she and I remained friends for years after that. And the only reason I met her is because I was doing the book about Marie. And so Flo is a sweetheart. But yeah, so it was, we interviewed all the people, put it all together. I was really proud of the Marie Severin book. It was nominated for an Eisner Award, and So I feel like it came out really well, and she, as I said, she was very happy with it. And to me, that was the greatest praise, was that she was happy with the outcome. So.
Right. I assume lots of artwork, is in the book as well. I've never read that. I hate to say it. I have the Trimpe book, and I do have the Tusca book too, but this Marine book I do not. I never got
Well,
that
I'll have to send you a copy.
Okay, signed.
If you want it signed, I will. Although that will reduce its
Please,
value, I'm sure.
I'll make sure you get my mailing address after the show.
Absolutely.
I did put a link in the chat. I did a quick search on CAF for her for sketch cards, and there are a lot. There's 77. It looks like sketch cards or similar pieces up on CAF. So Larry had mentioned he's got some in his CAF gallery, and yeah, there's a ton. Amazing.
She did a beautiful job too on them, and when you find out how little they got paid to do them, it's just astounding that they were willing to crank it out. But she made a point, like a lot of the other artists did too, of making sure that each one was a little different. Even though, and she included some very unusual characters in her list too. So.
Yeah, I've heard stories and things, like you can only draw the Silver Surfer so many times, and not have it, as a bust, right, and make it look a little different. And those people who collect sketch cards, will look at it and be like, I like it when she or he, whoever did them, would draw the eyes in a little bit more detail. Those are the ones that I want, even though there's 24 of them out there. I like them when it looked like they were more interested in whatever aspect of drawing that character, but it makes sense, like you said. Even back then, sketch card artists did not get paid a whole lot of money. They got paid in free sketch cards that they could take to shows. What probably made them more money than the work they did on those the inserted card artwork that they were doing. But
that's true.
But like you said, I mean, it was work, right? You could probably do it as you were nodding off at night. So, might as well fill your time with making artwork. So, we should look at some artwork, but I want to, Trimpe to me is, one of those guys who is, he studied with Marie, worked in the bullpen a long time. And, he's somebody who, his work on the Hulk is so incredible. You look at that amazing Hulk cover that just recently sold on Heritage, Hulk versus Dr. Doom. I mean, he came in at the right time on that book, and I think for especially for me and people of our age bracket. I mean, I think we think of Trimpe as just being really influential on that title. I mean, his ties to Wolverine, all of that. But I mean, what was some of the things about Herb and his career in comics that stood out to you?
The Hulk obviously was a big part of it, right? I loved the Hulk when I was a kid. I loved the TV show. I loved the comics. The Hulk was just, as superheroes go, as Marvel superheroes go, the Hulk was one of my favorites. And so it was Trimpe Hulk. I mean, that's what I grew up on. Trimpe was such a terrific guy. I liked his other stuff too, though. I loved his Ant-Man. I mean, I really thought he did a great job with Ant-Man, and it was kind of an interesting storyline, that he did involving Ant-Man. I wasn't into it quite as much into some of the other things that he did. I liked the Godzilla, but and he drew a really great Godzilla. But Godzilla wasn't necessarily my favorite character.
I do have a Trimpe Godzilla page. I don't have a Trimpe Hulk page, unfortunately.
Well, the Godzilla pages are very expensive anymore.
They are. There was one that sold like 2 weeks ago on a Heritage Weekly auction. I forget what it went for, like $6,000 or $7,000. I was shocked, but I mean, either it was a important foe that he was fighting, or I don't know. But it's cool to see, right? I mean, that people are that interested in Godzilla work, because I feel like when I first started collecting, you could have gotten those pages for $50-$60 a piece, and it didn't really there wasn't a whole lot of interest in the work at all. And now it certainly with that title, and it's changed. It's interesting.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot more appreciation now for Trimpe's work beyond just the Hulk, and it's just great to see. He was a terrific guy, just a wonderful, very genuine person, and in addition to being a great artist. And I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know him and working on the book. And the real shame there was that Herb died before the book came out. He went to a convention one weekend and then came home and then went to bed that Sunday night, didn't wake up again, and it was a shame. He'd seen an early manuscript, but he didn't get to see the finished product. But he put a lot of effort into it, and it was a terrific guy. I always was glad to have gotten to know him some, and I love his artwork. His artwork is just terrific, and not just on the comic stuff. He did the design work for the Hulk Honeycombs cartoon commercial, that came out back in the 70s, and he did the design work for the Crest commercials that came out back in the 70s. And it's terrific to me because I remember those Crest commercials, and the Honeycomb ones too, for that matter. And to realize that Trimpe's the one who did all the design work for that and put it all together and came up with the ideas, did storyboards and the whole works. It was very, very cool. We
had him. We had him at the Big Wow show in San Jose. He and his wife flew out one year, and for whatever reason, and it didn't happen often, I got to be the guy that picked him up at the airport and hung out with him that weekend and took him back. It was the days when you could actually walk with them to the gate and hang out with them, right? So yeah, I didn't get, so I got to talk with him a little bit, but yeah, he and his wife were very, very, friendly, and it was just a great experience for me early on when I was still shy and didn't talk to anybody. To be, Herb was very approachable and easy to get along with, and I really had a good time talking with him. But yeah. No, a nice guy, and one of these days I'll have a Hulk page in my collection. It may not have Hulk on it, but I'll be able to say I've got a Trimpe Hulk page. That'll be fine.
Well, the good part is he did a lot of them, so
he did, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's see. Daniel Goodwin mentions, "Hey Dan, good to see you." That he remembers Herb's work on G.I. Joe, for instance. Yeah, and Rick Welch mentioned Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
I mean, he worked on a lot, one way or another. So yeah, he had a very good career. And you're right. CJ says there's only 20 likes on our show with 50 people watching. So anybody who hasn't hit the thumbs up already, do it, please, this evening for us. Dewey and I are having a good conversation, and we always appreciate a thumbs up here. And we've even rebranded the YouTube channel, especially for the show that launched earlier today on the channel. But Dewey gets to be my first live interview under a different brand name. We changed the show. We basically, when we started the channel back in the day, we gave it the same name as the virtual show that we were doing, because that was because of the pandemic, right? Comic Art Live. And so I didn't know what to call the channel, so I just called it the same name as the show. But we decided, with all the other things we have going on, we decided to just change the name, call it CAF Plus, like several other live streaming services that are out there these days, and just keep the name Comic Art Live for the virtual show. It'll just make it a lot easier for us to talk about one thing or another. But yeah, plus, that's good. I know it's like a Red Cross right now, Rich, but yeah, we're here. We're coming to the rescue of the hobby in one way or another. But yeah, that's unfortunate that he didn't get to see the final printing of the book. But you got to do interviews with him, and that again, all that had to have been just rewarding by itself. I mean, are there, we know that that you do have the Marshall Rogers book that's coming out late June, early July, I think.
Yeah, early July, I think. Yeah.
Now, how did that come about? I mean, is just a fan of Batman or a fan of Marshall's work, or both?
Maybe probably more a fan of Batman. I'd done the fourth book with about Mike Grell.
Yeah.
With Jeff Messer, and when that was over, John Morrow asked us, if we'd be interested in doing something else, and one of the names he mentioned was Marshall Rogers. Well, I love Batman, and did some reading up on Marshall Rogers and realized, what a tremendous influence he had on Batman. I'll confess that before I started on the book, I didn't not know that much about Marshall Rogers, but I learned a lot in the course of working on it, and had a wonderful opportunity to interview his sister, who told some great stories about what it was like, growing up with him, and then we also talked to Terry Austin. We talked exhaustively to Steve Englehart.
Sure.
We got a hold of an old late night radio show interview that was done with Marshall Rogers. That's just fantastic. And so managed to put that book together. In fact, it just is finally finished now and is on its way to the printer. So, but as you said, it'll be out in July, and I'm really happy with it. I feel like it came together really well. I think it's a really nice tribute to Rogers. And, his Batman heavily influenced Tim Burton and what Tim Burton did with the original Batman. And so, and it's still, the stories are fascinating, to me. Englehart did a fantastic job of writing them, but Rogers did a really unique job of drawing them. And in fact, when he first turned in his early drawings for the Detective Comics run, the first one that he had with Englehart and Steve and Terry Austin, the DC guys didn't like the artwork. It was so different than what they had seen before that they were really not happy with it. In fact, he and Terry Austin both got chewed out by the editors about, though they just ruined Batman, and they would never be able to recover from this. Guys would never work again in the industry and all that, right? And then it was too late. They'd already published it. And then, of course, the letters started to come in, and the fans are saying, "Well, this is the greatest Batman we've seen in years. We love what he's doing with Batman," and it kind of redeemed him then. And they later went on and did a second mini series based on that same idea. But yeah, he's a really, really interesting guy. His training was in architecture. He
I
went
didn't know that.
to become an architect. Yeah. So if you look at Marshall Rogers' pages, the characters are interesting, but the backgrounds are incredible. He draws all these intricate buildings, and people talk about the fact that he was drawing actual streets in New York City, in these comics, and so it's in fact, there's one I've got a prelim of that this from the second Dark Detective series that's of the Joker's house, and the detail in it is absolutely incredible. So I loved his artwork, and it was wonderful getting to learn more about him and being able to kind of pull all that together. And I feel like we've put together a real nice tribute to him. The tragedy there, of course, is that he died at age like 57. And so he really didn't, he'd only kind of gotten into his own and didn't really have much of a chance to do more, because they were already planning a third Dark Detective storyline for Batman. In fact, he had drawn the first issue.
Mm-hmm.
But then he passed away and never got finished. So,
well, that's unfortunate. I was just pulling up a search that I could paste it into the chat for anybody who wants to, take a look at some of the most popular artwork on the site from Marshall Rogers. There's a Doctor Strange piece that's, I think, first in the list, but plenty of Batman after that. Detective Comics covers. Yeah. Like Rich just said, he could really draw architecture pretty darn well. Surprised. So now it's no surprising that he had that background. But yeah, anybody should follow that link if you're curious. The first couple of pieces that have Batman in them have great cityscapes behind them.
And he did Silver Surfer too. He did Doctor Strange. He did a really beautiful job on Doctor Strange, sort of paying homage to Steve Ditko.
Mm-hmm.
Did Mr. Miracle. Did some of his own creations as well. So he's quite a versatile guy. He just never worked on any one title for any particularly long period of time. But interesting guy. So.
Yeah, very, very true. Well, that's cool. So what was can we ask what the other artist books were that they pitched you that you chose to work with Marshall Rogers, or do you have other stuff that you're working on right now that might be coming out, in years to come?
Um, you mean in terms of other books, or?
Well, then you said that they gave you a few artists that as a suggestions that you could write about, and Marshall Rogers was
Oh,
one of them.
oh, I probably shouldn't say.
Okay.
Yeah. In fairness to John Morrow, I probably shouldn't say because I don't know whether or not they're going to pursue them or not. I'm not sure. I will tell you that I am working on with Aaron Sultan again a collection of Marie Severin's cartoons.
Cool.
Because after we did the Marie Severin book, it was favorably received. But the most common comment that I had from people after the book came out was, somebody really should collect all of the cartoons that she did because she would draw cartoons all the time. Something funny would happen because she worked in the bullpen, right? She and Herb Trimpe and John Romita and John Verpoorten and maybe a handful of other people were really the only people that worked in the office every day. And but something funny would happen, or they'd hear about something funny or whatever, and she'd draw a cartoon and hang it up on the wall. And so there are literally hundreds of her cartoons out there. And so we are pulling them all together and are going to be publishing a Marie Severin cartoon book, which is tentatively called Marie Severin Gags, although I'm not sure that that'll make it, right to the
To the
printer.
end. But are you going to try to describe some of the gags? Who's being lampooned in them, or give it some context?
Sure. Well, like one of the ones she one of the ones that they did is uh, apparently his drawing desk, Herb Trimpe's drawing desk, and John Romita's drawing desk were right next to each other in the bullpen. And this is a very small area, by the way. This is not, you think of bullpen as being something big. It was actually a very small space. If you ever get a chance, there's a great documentary out there called Herb Trimpe, We Love You. It's from 1970. And a guy who was in college was doing it for like a thesis. And so he went to Marvel and filmed this documentary about Herb Trimpe. But it shows pictures of the bullpen, and the bullpen was tiny. But you've got Herb Trimpe sitting next to John Romita, and they're both drawing on their boards, and they're talking while they're drawing. I mean, they can draw and hold a conversation at the same time. So, and Marie's overhearing all of this while she's over there doing her own thing. And apparently, I guess Trimpe had some kind of Native American heritage in his background. I don't think it was a lot of it, but some percentage of him had Native American background. John Romita had an Italian background. And so they would give each other a hard time about that. And Marie would draw a cartoon of the two of them. Romita's throwing meatballs and spaghetti over at Trimpe, and Trimpe's throwing, tomahawks over at Romita. And it was not necessarily politically correct, but they were humorous cartoons that they would, and then somebody would stick it up on the wall. And so Trimpe ended up keeping a ton of the ones that she'd done of him, and some of them have been published before, but a lot of those will be in the book. So.
Well, I have not seen the video. I did a quick Google of it, and so I pasted that in the chat link for anybody who wants to follow it. I'm going to watch that later tonight, I think. And
It's a great video. In fact, one of the people you will see in there is a very young Alan Kupperberg.
That's what Casper just said. So
Alan Kupperberg as a fan is in there.
Pre him working at Marvel. That's cool.
Oh yeah. This is like Alan Kupperberg at like 12 or something, right?
Oh,
yeah. I mean, it's
that young. Okay.
Yeah, they interviewed him, and he's actually very articulate, and he did a really great job in the interview. And his brother Paul's in there too, but his brother was younger and doesn't get interviewed, as I recall. But they interviewed Alan, I know, in the story, in the documentary. Wow. And they interviewed Trimpe, of course. They talk a little bit about Trimpe's personal life and show his daughter, his first daughter, and again they show scenes from the bullpen and everything. It's a really nice snapshot of what was going on in 1970.
I can't wait to watch it. I love anything that gives us some historical context on creators like that, especially if Kupperberg's in there at that age. I can't even begin to imagine. But wow. So I mean, that's wonderful. So, well, I'm glad that you've got another one that you're working on, and I mean, there's no schedule for it to get published right, at this point.
No, it it's still sort of in the working stages. It focused more on the Rogers one because the Rogers one had already been solicited, and we had to make sure we
Right.
got that one out. So they'll be working uh, on the Marie Severin one now, and we're going to include some interviews with other people. Like there's a Patty Cockrum and some of the other folks that that were contemporaries of hers and would have seen the cartoons. Scott Edelman, for example, and then also got a hold of a vintage fanzine interview that we got permission to reprint as well. So that's never been printed except in this fanzine back in the '70s. So, I think it'll be nice. It'll be fun. So,
Well, where would we be without the fanzines? Right.
it's true. Yeah, they were priceless. So,
Well, why don't we start looking at some artwork here? We've
sure.
like we always do. Like I think we've got 18 pieces to look at. We've already looked at a couple of them. So let's see here. The first piece that I've got queued up was a Vampirella piece.
So yeah, so as I mentioned, I was always a Vampirella fan. From back in reading the Warren magazines, and I started out with the Vengeance of Vampirella pages from Nathan Massengill. But of course, my favorite was Jose Gonzalez. I've always loved Jose Gonzalez Vampirella artwork, and so these I have a couple of pages from this particular issue. I love Vampirella as a character, but I felt like that, and I love the early stories probably better than some of the later ones. They got into some strange things, later on in the Warren run that I didn't find quite as appealing. But this story in issue 22 is just a nice, dramatic story that happens to have an occult angle to it. But it has a nice twist ending there at the end where they think they've killed the bad guy, but then in the last panel, see the bad guy's hand, come up out of the ground, and so it's that's part of why I like that page. It gives you a couple nice images of Vampirella by Gonzalez and a nice twist ending there. So.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic page. And if I had to pick a Vampirella artist, it would be Gonzalez as well, right? There's just something there's just an energy in his lines that I think just always come through, especially when he's drawing Vampirella. And there's something about those pages too, the original artwork pages that that speak to the era. I don't know what it is. I mean, I've seen a number of pages by Jose from Vampirella, and they're just cool to own. I've owned a few pages. I don't have any in my collection anymore, but I think I've owned 3 in the past, and they're just they feel like an artifact from that era, of magazine, comics as magazines, from that period. And I love them. I think this is a great example, and it's an end page too, which is always a plus.
Yeah, I like those too. One of my life goals is to be able to meet Jim Warren. He's still alive. He goes to a convention up in the Northeast once a year. And so I'm hoping that he will come again this year, and then I can get up there and meet him because he's like 94 years old or something. But that's on my to-do list that I'm hoping to do this year. But
I think you should do it this year.
Yeah, I'm running out of time. Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is beautiful, and I can tell you, I don't think that in the all the years that I've been interviewing people that we've brought up a Gonzalez Vampirella page too often as one of somebody's picks. So this is nice to see and share. Now this next one was made out to you, so that's saying something. It's Alan Bellman, of course, but how, when, and where?
So I could tell you exactly when. Actually, I could have dug it up. I should have done that to be able to tell you. But years ago, I came up with the idea of getting an artist to do a drawing for me that I would use then as the cover for my Christmas cards. And so that became a thing. Every year, I'd find a new artist to do a drawing for me for my Christmas cards. And this particular year, I had met Alan Bellman, a couple of years before, In fact, I have the distinction, and he would tell everybody this when he met them, of being the very first person to get a commission from Alan Bellman. But I saw him at the first convention that he went to, which I think was Heroes Con, and asked him, and he did a little drawing of the Human Torch for me. So when it came around to needing another Christmas drawing for my Christmas card, I came up with this idea of, well, they have guest celebrities, serve as Santa Claus sometimes. What would it be like if the Human Torch were to serve as the Santa Claus at a Macy's or something? I don't think you get many takers, but so I gave the idea to Alan, and this is what Alan came up with, and I thought he did a great job with it. Nice sense of humor.
Yeah, that's not a lap you want to sit on, I don't think. But
yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I mean, Bell, he started his career, gosh, I mean, during World War II around there, right, with Timely. So he got to draw the torch. He got to draw a Cap early on. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy, just super nice. He and his wife both.
So did you print this out and use it as a Christmas card?
It was on my Christmas card that year. Yeah, it sure was.
Did you send him one?
In fact, one of the galleries on my CAF site is a collection of the Christmas drawings that I've used over the years as for my Christmas cards.
Oh shoot, I should have had that queued up and easy to paste in the chat. I'll try to dig that up. That's awesome. I mean, I always admire the people who have the forethought to do Christmas cards like this. I have a few friends who always do something creative. One of them usually gets an illustrator to do them every year, and usually by the time I think about Christmas cards, it's already December, right? So it's impossible to be able to put something like that together. But yeah, that's awesome.
Well, thank you.
Let me see here. And now we got a couple strips coming up next. So a Incredible Hulk transformation. I think this is awesome. So many times the Hulk transformation is, the artist wants to show off him going from man to monster, and you got to see the skinny frame becoming the giant Hulk. I love the fact that it's really just focused in. I mean, it's cropped in on the face, right? I mean, and that's all you need to see, and it's really powerful as a transformation. It's and I mean, it's been done, but it's unique to see it done in a strip like this.
Yeah, I love the Hulk strip. I really did. I thought it was really well done. It's a nice success story too, right? Because Larry Lieber started out on the Spider-Man newspaper strip, but kind of struggled to keep up with it. Now, of course, he ended up coming back to it and ran it all the way out for years, until it finally ended. But when it came to the Hulk strip, he really took it on and owned it. And Stan wrote it for a little while when it first got started, but then Larry took over writing it and wrote the whole rest of the strip. And eventually Larry stopped drawing it. Other people like Charles Nicholas and Alan Kupperberg and some other ones would draw it. But and I would be suspicious that this one was inked by maybe even Rich Buckler or somebody else, right? Because there were people that did help him out when it came to the inking. But right, as Marcus says, it's based on the TV show. It's not based on the comic book. So it's David Banner and Jack, what's his name? The reporter that was always pursuing, a Banner across the country is in the strip as well. It's all based on the TV show. It came out in 1978.
78? Is that when is that the year that 12/12/78. Seventh week. Marcus says McGee. Is that the
that's it.
name
Jack
of the reporter?
McGee. Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, Jack McGee was the reporter's name. Yeah.
Well, that's a beauty. And I did find the link to your Christmas card, so I put that in the chat for everybody to queue up and look at whenever you'd like. Where do we go from that? Oh, that's right. So David Crane strip by Win Mortimer.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Win Mortimer. I love his artwork. I think he's one of those guys that I did not get to meet, but I wish I had. And for a while, When Mortimer did this newspaper strip called David Crane. He started it out. Ed Dodd, who did Mark Todd, the newspaper strip Mark Todd. No, I'm sorry, Mark Trail.
Mark Trail, right?
Yeah, Ed Dodd was the writer. Mark Trail was the newspaper strip. But Ed Dodd was the writer for David Crane. But when Mortimer was the artist, at least for the first several years, it later was taken over by Craig Flessel, and the whole tone of the strip changed. But early on, it's all about a pastor. It's all about a small town pastor who graduates from seminary and gets married, and he and his wife moved to this small town. And it's his struggles with dealing with the patriarch from the church and dealing with the other family members that are having problems or whatever. And it's a very wholesome strip. It would never get published today, but it was really beautifully done at the time. And it's the artwork. There's no superheroes in there or anything like it. It's just all about Crane and the church and the family and the surroundings. And it's a wonderful. It's almost like it's a Wonderful Life kind of thing. It's that kind of feel to it. So I've got several of the early strips from the series, and as I said, it's the artwork that I really like the most. I think it's just really well done.
Well, this is almost 70 years old. I think it was 56. So that's that's been around. That's a long time ago. You're right. It is a different era. We would not see these printed today. But Rich Danny says the pastor's wife was good looking.
Yes,
in so many words.
The pastor's wife was hot. Yes, that's true.
There had to be some other interest in the stories than just good wholesome living, I guess. But yeah, I always liked Mortimer's work too. Yeah, but very nicely done. I think this is a good example. And you have about a dozen pieces by Mortimer in your calf gallery, I think.
Yeah, I'm a fan of his. I really liked his artwork. As I said, he's one of those guys that I really wish I had a chance to meet. I think he would. I do know people who knew him or met him and said he was a great guy. So,
well, here I'm going to share this image from your cap. I just think it's fun because it's actually the same year as this piece, 1956, and it shows Mortimer in his studio. That's pretty cool. Holding some of the originals.
Yeah. That's when he was first started drawing the strip, and there's a publicity shot for that. So.
Now, if you had the original that he was holding, that would be pretty cool.
That would be great. I haven't tried to figure that out. Part of the problem is, of course, the strip was never collected. You can find the cut out strips from the paper if you hunt for them, but I haven't tried to figure out which one that is. That would be interesting.
Yeah, well, he had a pretty decent spot to draw from. I mean, look at the view there.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he did okay.
I believe so. Let's see here. Where are we going to next? Oh, well, this is Tusca and Ayers on this one. This is a Kazar page from issue 2. But hey, it's not all the X-Men. You get Angel in it, but it's a good one. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. In the original X-Men series, the original stories ended with issue number 66.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, from 67 to 93, they were reprints. But after issue 66, they did have this 3-part original story about the Angel that appeared. And I don't know, they'd run origin stories for a while in the back of the X-Men. I don't know if this may have been originally intended to be, included as one of those, or I don't know the origins, unfortunately, about how the 3-parter ended up where it did, but it ended up being printed in Kazar number 2 and number 3. And then that got canceled. So then the last part appeared in Marvel Tales number 30. And it was a 3-part series about the Angel and a bad guy called the Dazzler, who has no relationship at all to the later Dazzler. But the Dazzler kidnaps the Angel's girlfriend and then uses that to manipulate the angel. And the angel, of course, eventually triumphs, as good always does. But one of the interesting parts about the three-parter is that it was written by Jerry Siegel of Superman fame. Stan Lee was, Siegel was having trouble finding work, and Stan Lee offered him an opportunity to do some writing, and so he did. And this is one of the things that he wrote was this three-parter. So some of the dialogue is a little stilted, but I still like it. It's an interesting vignette into the history of the X-Men. So.
Well, it's a very nice page. Oh, let's see here. Oh, this was a nice one. Severin Mooney on this one. So from 73, from the Cat issue 2. I mean, just I think it's just a perfect page from that era. I mean, the from the panel layout to the characters drawn on them, I love it. I mean, this is a great page to have in your collection.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's one I've had for a long time, and I love the Cat miniseries. I thought it was great. It was really well done, and I think Marie did a terrific job with it. Although she griped about how when Wally would do the inking, she said he makes all the women look so sexy, and she said it like it was a bad thing, but this I thought it was a great series. I thought Marie did a terrific job on the page, and it was, I wish they'd been able to continue with it. Ramona Fradon, it ran for 4 issues and then got canceled, like a lot of those comics they introduced at the time. They did Sheena, the She-Devil at the same time. They did Night Nurse at the same time, and none of them lasted more than 4 or 5 issues. But this one, there was a 5th issue that was drawn by Ramona Fradon, and it was never published. And I think it's a shame that they haven't pulled that together, because I think either most of the pages exist still, or there are images of what the other pages look like. And it would be interesting to see it kind of all pulled together. But yeah, I love Marie's work on this series. It was an interesting character, interesting premise, and it's a favorite of mine.
Well, yeah, that's a keeper right there. I mean, just right era, and a great art team. Oh man, let me see. The next piece is a prelim.
Yeah, I have a thing
Frank
for
Thorne. We've seen, Anthony sells a lot of Frank Thorne prelims, but this is a really great one. I mean, I don't think I've seen one quite like this. I mean, it's very accomplished. Frank's where he's going to take this thing completely.
I love it. I have a thing for prelims anyway, and I'm not exactly sure why. Well, I take that back. I do know why. The thing I like about prelims is when I love the creative process in general, right? I think it's interesting to see the evolution of it. So I think it's great when artists do prelims or some type of early sketches or drawings or something to give you an idea about how they got from the conceptual point to the finished drawing. But I also like it when they're different, when the prelim's different than the published page, and that is the case with this one. Mm-hmm. This one has a note at the top, which you probably can't read here, but if you go out to my site, you can see it big enough to read it, and it's from Roy Thomas, who was co-writing and editing the series at the time. This was from Red Sonja number 7. She started out in Marvel Feature and ran for 6 or 7 issues, and then got her own title and ran for about 7 issues. And then that was the end of that. And it's hard for me to believe now looking back on it, because Thorne's artwork was just gorgeous. But this is from the last issue, from issue 7 of Red Sonja, and it's a battle between the whole issue is a battle between Conan and Red Sonja. But the note at the top by Roy Thomas is basically telling Thorne that he's made that first panel to the left there too long. He didn't like the fact that it overshadowed Conan then in the bottom panel. Now, ironically, when Thorne fixed it, he actually ended up making Conan smaller in that bottom panel, and I think it actually looks better as it is. I don't really think it hurt anything, to show it the way it was, but Roy did not like it at all, and definitely wanted it changed. And Thorne, it was not unusual for Roy to make comments, and Thorne would adapt them as necessary. The funny part about it is, I have talked to both, because I did an article about the prelims, and the funny part about it is neither Roy nor Thorne remembered exactly why he did the prelims, because he was doing them for everything. He did them for his whole run on Marvel Feature. He did it for the whole run on Red Sonja, and nobody could remember why, because he was an accomplished artist. He'd done Tomahawk for DC for ages and did beautiful work on that. And I could see maybe having him do the first issue or something, but he did them for the whole run. And to me, I think the prelims are great. I really and sometimes he would improve on it when he did the finished drawing, and sometimes I think the prelim is better. And so you'll find a lot of prelims in my calf gallery.
Well, here I'll hide this, and you can see how it was changed. Let me pull this up there. There we go. So yeah, this is still a good, it's still good, but it's not quite the same as the way he had originally laid it out.
And actually, I guess Conan's actually maybe a little bit bigger in the published version, but he looks just thicker or something, right? He doesn't look. To me, he looks stronger in the prelim than he does in the published version. I don't know. Maybe it's just personal preference, but a lot of it is the same. He got a little bit closer up on the close up of Red Sonja's face. But otherwise, the same basic premise is there. So.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe because it was Conan, they wanted to have a little bit more editorial control over it for whatever reason. Conan was the big book back then, right? Every early article you read about fandom from the late 60s and early 70s, Conan was like number one. As far as the number one selling book over FF, Spidey, it didn't matter. Everybody loved Conan. For my time, I'm like, how is that even possible, right? But yeah, it's true. I've read many articles about that, and you probably can attest to it too.
You're absolutely right. In fact, I think it's the issue before this one. The Conan and Red Sonja get attacked by this giant serpent, and they're both trying to get out of the serpent's grasp. And in the original prelim that Thorne did for that page, Red Sonja manages to slice the serpent in two and freeze Conan. Well, there's a note up at the top of the prelim from Roy Thomas saying you can't have Conan get saved twice by Red Sonja in the same issue. So make sure that Red Sonja gets captured by the serpent too. So you were absolutely right. They were trying to protect that Conan IP there. So. Right.
So much for women's lib, right? It was only the late 60s, early 70s for crying out loud. But that's funny. But I'm glad that you put both the published piece, with the prelim to give us context in your calf gallery. That's always a good thing. A lot of people do that on calf, and a lot of people don't. But I do like that, especially because a lot of times people put the way something was published first, versus the way it was drawn, and all you're really seeing is how the colors were put down. I think seeing the prelim and then the finished piece is really remarkable. Several people in the chat mentioned it too. Prelims are, they're enjoyable. Most collectors, I think, enjoy the process of what goes into making a comic, and when you get notes like that's like, that's such a treat to get to see the inner workings of what made the comic book that you ended up getting.
I agree.
Let me get to the next piece. I love the last panel on this. It's just it's it's just amazing to see Tony's Iron Man suit like spread out like that on the wall. But really, really nice page. Again, it's this is from Iron Man 38 by Tusca again.
Yeah, I like Tusk anyway, and I liked Iron Man, and I thought it was sort of a cool idea that that he had it hidden behind a panel, in his office. I always liked the idea that it was in a suitcase, or it was somewhere kind of close at hand where he could pop it on whenever he needed to, and so yeah, this is one of my favorites too. I've had this one for a long time. It's hanging up on my wall here to my right. So yeah, it is kind of 007-ish. It's true.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. It's a really great example of the machinery in the first panel, the close up on the in the fourth panel, and then yeah, that last panel is perfect. And I even like where George signed it. You know, in that area. I mean, that makes me smile when I see that. A lot of times you kind of cringe maybe when like John Byrne signs on the inside of a panel or something, but I don't have any problem with where George did that. That's awesome. It's literally like putting his mark on this page. That's really good. When Iron Man had 10-inch subwoofers as part of
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh yeah, but I like this page. And I'm glad you have it on your wall because it is a great example. Now another Trimpe here, a nice Hulk smash commission style piece made out to you.
Yeah, I told him I wanted a Hulk smash, one. I is that a big fan of the Hulk, a big fan of Trimpe, and so to me that was sort of the quintessential Trimpe was a Hulk smash kind of thing. So I thought he did a nice job with it. It was as I said, that's the Hulk I grew up with was Trimpe's Hulk.
His Hulk was a monster, that's for sure. Yeah, he Trimpe did a lot of cover recreations and some interior stuff, but mostly cover recreations. You've probably seen him floating around. There's some on calf, but they were so good. I mean, because he would do them on like 8.5 by 11, so they weren't large, but gosh, I've seen at least 10, and they're just phenomenal. He really was incredibly skilled, and because a lot of times recreations they just don't hold up, especially if you do them in pencil only, and almost all of his were, and they're fantastic. I mean, I regret not picking one up. When I saw them when they were $700 or $800. I mean, anything that you'd see out there now, I mean, they're going to be 4, 5, 6 times that, just as a small little sketch, but they're beautiful.
That's true. One of the things that I noted and I asked him about is the fact that the Hulk had bad teeth, and he said, yeah, well, it only made sense that you've got this human body that gets contorted into this giant being, that's green, and it's only logical then that something would happen to his teeth too, that they wouldn't be all perfectly straight, in his mouth, that it would have a similar kind of effect on his teeth too, which I thought was an interesting way of looking at it. But he was very deliberate about making sure that the Hulk looked like he had bad dental work.
Attention to details, right?
As Marcus said, Banner needs braces.
So. Yeah, but no, that's awesome. Did you get this at a show or just sometime when you were interviewing him?
When we were working on the book, it was one of the things that I'd always noticed about his Hulk that I asked him about in particular, and he clued me in then as to his approach. So,
well, it's wonderful. And then we're switching back to Tusca. We're going back and forth between your favorites here. So this is from 1948. Crime Does Not Pay, issue 67. Gentleman's getting buried alive.
Yeah, George started out back in the late 30s working for Eisner, and this was really the point where he hit his stride. Right, he was working for Lev Gleason on the Crime Does Not Pay title. He was featured in virtually for I don't know how many issues, dozens of issues. he was featured in basically every issue. A lot of times he had the lead story, and the stories were frequently based on actual events or actual people. In other words, they did a story about John Dillinger, for example, and typically, although the criminal's lifestyle in the story in the beginning anyway might appear to be somewhat glamorous, they always ended up meeting their fate at the end. And so one of the things I loved about this particular page is that the guy gets buried alive. I mean, that's just classic, proof that crime does not pay. Of course, it's another criminal that's burying him, but still. But this was a time period in which, George's drawing later on when he was doing Iron Man and all that became more cartoony. That was really a byproduct of the work that he did on the newspaper strips, because in order to appeal to the strip audience, they were looking for something that was more cartoony. And he kind of carried that on into Iron Man and then in the later work that he did. When he was doing this work, it was ultra realistic, so when I have a couple of Crime Does Not Pay pages, and my criteria for buying them is that either Mr. Crime has to appear on them. That was like the ghost host of the Crime Does Not Pay stories. And actually, if an interesting footnote, Mr. Crime as a host for the stories predates the EC horror hosts, the Old Witch and the Vault Keeper and the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
Mr. Crime came out before they did. So it was really, and it's not the first time they ever had hosts to host a story, but Crime Does Not Pay used it to great effect. So to me, either the page needed to have Mr. Crime on it, or it needed to have somebody getting shot, because that was, it's a crime page, right? Somebody needs to get shot if you want the page. So, and I like that on this one. Somebody gets shot and buried alive, so it's like the perfect page.
Oh yeah, no, that's awesome. Lots of fun commentary in the chat too. Good thing it was.
And it's large art, so that's another one that's hanging on.
Oh, even better then.
Yeah.
I think this next piece is a colorist. Yeah, color guide from EC by Marie. It's
by Marie. Yeah. Of course, Marie started out working for EC. She got on because of her brother, and she just did a wonderful job with the EC coloring. She's highly praised, for the work that she did. She was called by Bill Gaines, the conscience of EC, because she would sometimes tone down some of the gory stuff that they did. But in reality, when I asked her about it, her comment was that she wasn't trying to be the conscience of EC, but what she was trying to do was to make sure that people didn't miss the detail and the really tremendous quality of the artwork. That if it all had been fully colored exactly the way that it probably would have looked, in real life, it would have detracted from what the artwork looked like. So sometimes she would take a panel and color it all one color, right? Or color like the character, the guy there in blue. He wasn't literally blue, but she was trying to contrast him with what was going on in the background and the other guy that's in the panel there. So she used that to great effect in the EC stuff, and as I said, was praised for her contributions then to the end product, which of course were enormously successful. So much so that it got the attention of the Senate Committee on the Juvenile Delinquency. So,
of course. Marcus says that Marie remastered the EC reprints colors too.
She did. Yeah, wow. She sure did. And an interesting anecdote you will find sometimes on like even Heritage's site, for example, when they're going to sell something of Marie or of a color guide for EC, that she gets credited with color guides, back to into the late 40s. But the reality is Marie didn't go to work for EC until 1951. So if she's credited with coloring anything before then, it's not Marie's colors. It's somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this is really nice though. The let's see, the next piece is by Don Heck, right? And this is a Lois Lane story from 72.
Right. It's a Rose and the Thorn story. Rose and the Thorn was a backup that ran in Lois Lane for
Okay.
probably 20 issues, something like that. Started issue 106, and then I think it ended about 126, 127, something like that. It was a great backstory. Here was a character whose dad was a police officer who had been killed by the mob, and so she was traumatized by that. And so when she was asleep, she would sleepwalk and become the Thorn. And she found this costume in an old costume shop and started wearing it out and clobbering bad guys, And she was sort of almost like a female Batman, in that regard, right? A vigilante who had no special superpowers or anything, but who did have these little gimmicks. She had these what they call them, thistle bombs or something. She had all these little gimmicks that she would use sometimes during the stories, but it was mostly judo or that kind of thing that she was using on the bad guys. But people have commented that she bears some resemblance to the Black Widow, which Don Heck also did in fine form, and there are some similarities there in terms of their overall general appearance. But I'm a huge fan of the Rose and the Thorn. I just think it was a great story. It's a travesty that they've never collected these stories, and because they would make a great, well, you wouldn't have enough for an omnibus, but some kind of collection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were just really, really well done. And of course, she was basically when she would fall asleep, she would unconsciously or subconsciously become the Thorn, go fight bad guys, and then come back and take off her costume. She had the presence of mind to take the costume off, and then fall asleep. And when she woke back up, she had no idea what happened. And like Rick said, she'd wake up with bruised knuckles. Or there's one where she's in a coal mine and she wakes up with coal dust on her hands, but she doesn't know why, and she even gets involved with a psychiatrist at one point, and he knows there's something wrong, but he can't figure out what. And then in later issues, she became almost narcoleptic, right? Where she could transform without having to actually fall asleep. But she went into sort of a trance kind of thing. But at any rate, I thoroughly enjoyed this.
You're selling me on DC tonight, Dewey. I mean, it makes me actually want to go and read this story now.
They're really great. That's the unfortunate part, is they've never been collected. Wow. Now, granted, the Lois Lane books are not typically terribly expensive, but
right.
Yeah,
interesting.
I definitely recommend it. It started in 106, which unfortunately the 106 issue is a pricey one, because that's the one where Lois got transformed into an African American woman, so she could experience what that was like. And so the primary story in that issue 106 is what makes it expensive, not the Rose and Thorn backup. So
interesting. Well, Marcus says lots of bondage. Rose and Thorn.
Lots of bondage.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Even David Wetzel says that sounds like a great story. Yeah. I'm intrigued. Okay, so next up we have, this is from Legion of Substitute Heroes from Adventure Comics, 374, 1968.
Right. This was the Legion that I grew up on, was Win Mortimer's Legion. As I said, I'm a big fan of Win Mortimer. This is really, I didn't discover David Crane until years later. This is what I grew up on in terms of Win Mortimer, was his Legion work. And I just loved his work on the Legion. I mean, Kurt Swan did a beautiful job. I love Mike Grell's work on the Legion, Dave Cockrum's work on the Legion. So I read all of that, but the sweet spot for me was Win Mortimer, and this is one of my prized pieces, because it features the Legion of Substitute Heroes, and they just didn't appear in that many of the issues. And I thought it was you could say what you want to about Jim Shooter. You may or may not have made the greatest editor of Marvel Comics, right? Marie certainly had some choice words to say about him, but in terms of what he was able to do for the Legion, it was just amazing. And here's a case where this kid not only discovered how to create this team of superheroes that were teenagers from all over with all these different kind of powers, but he came up with the idea that there'd be like this reject group who would also form their own team, who would fill in when the primary team was not available. And I thought that was really clever. Now, granted, and I have a soft spot for Night Girl. I think she's terrific. Also well drawn. And Polar Boy, I never did understand why Polar Boy didn't get in. To me, I thought his powers were good enough to have made it. It's good enough for Iceman. I don't know why it wasn't good enough for Polar Boy. But you've also got like Stone Boy is there, right? He's in the top panel. He's flying down. All he could do was turn to stone. So he would like stand in a doorway and turn to stone or something. I don't know. It's really useful. And then there's another one of the characters, I think he's in the second panel, who's flying down, who was, I think it's Color Kid, who basically all he could do was make things change colors. I don't know how that was particularly useful, but, so at any rate, granted, some of the characters that were in the Substitute Legion may not have been the most.
I think there's a reason why they couldn't make the full-fledged team.
Exactly. Yeah. But
although that, Rock Boy sounds kind of interesting. I mean, he could block the path of people. He could be used as a projectile by other members who were strong enough to pick him up and throw him. I mean, there's probably something there. So you're still intriguing me about the DC now, more and more, Dewey.
It's true. And I'm thinking, okay, you got Bouncing Boy, right? Bouncing Boy made it in, but Polar Boy did not, or I don't know. But
they needed to form a union, I think.
I don't know. But here they get their heyday, right? Of course, you can tell in the middle panel on the right that the people that are fighting really are not bad guys. It's Supergirl and Matter Eater Lad, who is another one that, I mean, I guess it's handy to have somebody who could eat anything, on your team, but they were undercover trying to infiltrate this gang. And of course, the Substitute Legion did not know that. So they were trying to come to the rescue and help out the science police, and be good guys there. And it's only in the bottom panels that Polar Boy realizes, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. These are the Legionnaires. So I think it's a cool page. And
it is. And the layout's really nice too, Dewey. The diagonal lines for the bottom four panels, stuff for any of them like that. I actually really like that.
Yeah, great layouts. And Will's right. The Shooter did do layouts. I don't know if he laid this out or not. He laid out a number of the early ones, though. That's how he got the job, right? Is he actually drew entire comics and brought them in to show DC, and they realized, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. He's got good sense. And I talked to somebody, I think it was Mike Grell, who commented about the fact that if you worked with Shooter and Shooter gave you a script, you would get like a book. It would be like 100 pages, for a 20-page story, you'd get like 100 pages of script that would describe literally panel by panel what every single person was doing, what they were saying, the whole deal. So he had that fondness for the Legion that carried forward for years, well beyond when you first got started. So.
Wow. I guess he was a stickler for details.
that he was, but it pays off, in when you see the end product. And there were people who didn't mind working in that kind of setting. A lot of people preferred working from a full script or whatever. And like Ramona Fraden's a great example of that. I don't know that she worked with Shooter, but she tried to come over to Marvel, and she did one issue of the Fantastic Four. I think it was 133. And then she drew that unpublished issue of the Cat, and it wasn't her fault it didn't get published, but she told me she hated drawing with the Marvel method. She didn't like the plot. She wanted a full detailed script. She was not getting paid to do the writing. She was getting paid to do the drawing. Tell her what to draw and she would draw it. So that was all she ever did for Marvel, and went back, stayed to DC after that for years. So.
Well, it wasn't for everybody.
No, it was not.
Sure. Now, next up, we have a piece by Jim Mooney, Dial H for Hero. Now, what was this used for? Was this like a pinup in the back of the book?
No, it actually came out later. It came out around 2000, I think.
Oh, okay.
And it was for the Secret Origins series or something like that, right? Secret Files. I forget what the name of the comic book was. Um, but this was the other comic book. The one that I was a big fan of when I was a kid was Green Lantern. The other one was Dial H for Hero, and it was for the same idea, right? I could have found the dial. Now, whether or not I would have been able to decipher the hieroglyphics, okay, maybe not. But Robbie was able to, so at least gave me hope. And Robbie could become any kind of hero you wanted to, and I just love that idea. And so, it's strangely enough, not many of the original Dial H for Hero pages have surfaced. Now, I don't know if they may have gotten destroyed. I don't know if they're in some private collection that just haven't popped up. But you've seen maybe, a cover, you've seen a splash, and then I used to have a sequential page that did not feature Robbie. It was somebody else in the on the page, and that's about it. It's just they're very tough to come by. So when I actually got the prelim to this page first, and looked for years to find the published one, and finally found the published one. I think it was on Heritage, and so now I have both, and they're very similar, except he moved the image from one side of the page to the other, but or they did when they printed it, but otherwise the drawing, the prelim is very similar to the published version. But I thought Mooney was great. Mooney was one of those guys that it was a shame that he didn't live longer, because I think he'd done some, coming to conventions and that kind of thing, but then he got into health problems, and I remember meeting his wife one time at a convention in Tampa. She came and sat in at a table for him because he had not been able to come to the show. But he would have been such a hit at the conventions if his health had lasted longer. But he was a favorite of mine, and I love Dial H. So,
well, his line work is beautiful, crisp, very confident, and just exactly what it needed. I'm looking, just looking at his just the way he's rendering the guy. Again, I didn't read Dial H, but the gentleman with the dial, who Marcus says it looks like me when I had short hair. But I mean, it's perfect. I love Mooney's work too. I don't think I ever saw Mooney at a show. When did he? What year did he pass? I don't even. Not really familiar with his.
Yeah, I won't swear to it, but it was. I want to say it was in the 90s.
Okay.
Maybe late 90s. I won't swear to that, but it was way too soon, right? I mean, I think he might have been in his 60s, mid 60s or something, maybe 68. I'm not sure, but a lot of the guys lived a whole lot longer than that. Of course, George was 93 when he died. So it felt like, wow, Mooney would have been such a hit on the convention circuit if he'd had more of an opportunity. So.
Let's see. We have two more pieces to look at here, and the next one is another Don Heck, and Don has a way with drawing the ladies. That's my takeaway from the couple pieces in your collection, Dewey. And it's stylized, but beautiful for the era.
Yeah, Tusca would definitely be my favorite artist. Don Heck would be my second favorite. And I love Batgirl. Of all the characters, Batgirl is by far my favorite. I love the Batgirl from the original Batman TV series back in '68. I guess the first time she appeared, and I've always loved the Batgirl comics, and I love the Batgirl art. And this is a nice representative page. I think Heck did a nice job. A lot of people, their representation of Batgirl was smoother. Like Jose Delbo, right? His was more of a finished Batgirl, and Jose Delbo did a beautiful job. But I liked the kind of rough work that Heck did on Batgirl, and I particularly like this page because this was in that time period when Commissioner Gordon had figured out who Batgirl was, but he and Barbara Gordon hadn't had that conversation yet. And so he was dropping hints to her to let on to the fact that he knew who she was. And of course, later on, they became more open in that exchange. But this was a nice time period when it was still a secret and yet not. So.
Well, it's a very beautiful page. I really like that one. It's got me. I'm searching on CAF right now for Don Heck artwork for sale. just because I don't think I've ever owned a piece by Heck, but now I'm CJ says he died in 2008. Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't believe I ever saw Mooney at a show. Interesting.
Well, Heck is one of those guys those other guys that I really wish I had a chance to meet. Heck died in 1995.
Yeah.
Right on the cusp of when I started going to conventions, and again, way too soon. Would have been a huge hit, if he was doing commissions and stuff in those last few years. He did go to a few conventions between like 93 and 95, and he was doing some commissions. You see them pop up periodically, but I would love to have met him. He was just, and of course his Avengers stuff, the stuff he did for the Avengers cost big bucks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. CJ said Jim died in 2008. Oh, wow. 88. I did not know that. Well, I lied. I did not purposely lie, but I could have sworn
it was unintentional.
Yeah.
we won't hold it against you.
Yeah. I guess Jim was probably one of the older ones in the whole Marvel, bullpen.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have one other thing to look at, and it's not a piece of artwork. So you have Don Heck's art table. So how did you come across this?
Well, I used to be part of the Comic and Fantasy Art Amateur Press Association, the CFA APA.
Yep.
And that was formed by Roger Hill. And so I met Roger through that. Roger knew that I was a big fan of Don Heck, and Roger knew Heck's family. So when Heck passed away, Roger got some artwork from them, but he also bought the art table from them with the idea of donating the art table to a museum. Well, believe it or not, he couldn't find a museum that would take the art table. I don't know if they didn't know where they were going to store it or what they were going to do with it or what, but he could not find anybody to take it. And so he reached out to me. I mean, I when I found out that was the case, I expressed interest in buying it, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, if you'd like to have it, here's what I'd like to have for it." And I told him it's a deal. And so my dad and I flew up to New York, and we picked up the art table. We rented a van, picked up the art table, and drove it back to my house, and it's sitting right here in my study. And I have some artwork displayed on it, so. I'm still making use of it, but this is the art table that Tales of Suspense 39 was drawn on. And so, it's just as a tremendous, and the Batgirls and the Avengers, and this is there's a lot of history on this art table, and in fact, the ring up at the very top is a ring around that light that he has clamped to it that you can see in the picture on the left, but that's the Marvel bullpen picture, and that's the art table. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you've preserved it. It should end up in a museum somewhere. That's for sure.
Yeah, Aaron and I've talked before about trying to talk the local museum here in Raleigh to doing some kind of a comic related thing sometime, but have never gotten around to it. But it would be kind of nice for other people to be able to enjoy it. But yeah, I got his art table, and I got the light box too that he used. So that is kind of cool.
Wow, that's awesome. But you've been selling some artwork through GAF lately. I mean, I'm sure everybody notices that. I mean, are you like purging stuff out of, or is it just, because it seems like it's been the last 12 months or so? I feel like I'm seeing it in earnest. What's going on?
Well, the truth is, about a year ago, my dad died. And I mean, he was 96 years old, lived a long, full life. And, and I was very blessed to have him here in town for the last year of his life. And so I got to spend a lot of time with him, and it was wonderful. But when he died, he was a collector too, right? He didn't collect art, but he collected coins. He collected Legos.
Oh, wow.
He collected model trains. And when he died, my sister and I had to go through the house and dispose of everything, right? And there were a certain number of things, that she wanted, or a certain number of things that I wanted, but there were a lot of things that, just nobody wanted. And when he passed away, before they closed the lid on that coffin, the only thing he took with him was $1 silver to give the ferryman to cross the river Styx, and that was it. And everything else that he had collected was gone. And I mean, as I said, some of it got preserved in my sister or I's collections, but still, I guess it was a sobering moment for me,
Sure.
that as much as I love this stuff and I've enjoyed collecting it, I can't take it with me. And so I have been parting with some stuff, and am continuing to do so. I mean, there's some things that I have in the sort of plan to be buried with category, but there are a lot of other things that I feel like it's time for somebody else to enjoy them. So,
Well, that makes a lot of
I do
sense.
have a number of things for sale. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So people, do you have any Don Heck Batgirl artwork for sale?
I actually do have one Batgirl page for sale, and I've got another one that's going to be in Comic Link next month. So.
All right. So it's not just all through your CAF. You're utilizing some of the auction houses and everything too.
Yeah, frankly, I prefer to use CAF for a couple of reasons. I much rather that the artwork go to another collector, right? To somebody who's really going to enjoy it and appreciate it and likes it, and so and not just a dealer. Don't get me wrong, dealers are fine. I've got good relationships with the dealers, and I've got some great pieces from them over the years. But to me, the collector to collector stuff is the best way to exchange art. So
Sure. No, well, that makes a lot of sense. We can't take it with us, right? At the end of the day, if your family's not going to want your collection, then what are you going to do? I mean, it's well, that answers that question. I've always wondered what, because I have noticed the last year, just your name pops up a lot in my want list, my keyword want list stuff every day, or not every day, but once a week or something, I see something pop up. So, all right, well, that's we're all going to wrestle with that at some point if we're not already wrestling with it. I said it to Maureen yesterday. I don't know, she was in here working on the other computer, and I looked at her, I'm like, we have too much artwork, because literally, I mean, there's stuff I'm kind of coming across that I haven't looked at in 10 years. And she looked at me and she's like, we do not have enough artwork. We can always have more. I mean, it was like the last thing I would thought she would say. I figured she was going to agree with me. Yes, you're right. We don't look at the artwork that we have, but no, she had the other approach, at least for now. So I guess she's planning on living, for 30 or 40 more years. But yeah, I mean, it hits you sometimes when you've been at a hobby that you love, that you can accumulate a lot more things than you can ever really enjoy or appreciate. And when does it become just hoarding if you're not really loving it, and getting it, take it out and look at it. That's the part that frustrates me when I come across something that I totally forgot that I had, even in just a convention sketch, like, wow, I haven't looked at that piece in 15 years. Why? So yeah, I totally get it.
I will say, though, to your point, my wife has been equally supportive of me also.
That's good.
And there have been cases where, like, there's a piece on the wall that I've talked about, possibly selling, and my wife will say, "Oh no, you're not selling that. You need to hang on to that." So
she knows which pieces are meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Dewey, this was a good part two for us. I mean, 5 years later, but I knew when I was browsing CAF and I came across your CAF, I was like, I haven't talked to Dewey in a long time. I always remember the writing that you've done, and I think that there isn't enough documentation that's been done in our hobby. That's why it's so cool when you mentioned the Herb Trimpe, we love you. I have to go back and see that, because I don't think there's enough of that. And I'd like to think that there will be investment by other writers or documentarians who will come in and want to do more in this medium. Like you said, you kind of came back to comics when you were realizing how important they were to teaching your kids how to read, right? So there's a lot of great stories in there that need to be told, and that was just what I remembered when I saw your calf gallery, that you're out there doing it, and have done a great job at it, and we need more people like you doing what you've been doing.
Well, I appreciate that. It's something I really enjoy, and I encourage other people to do it too. There really are, as you said, there's all kinds of great people out there. When I think of all the artists and inkers and all that haven't really had their stories captured, they really need to. There's wonderful people out there doing great work, and we need to learn more about them.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Well, thank you for doing this, Dewey. If there's ever anything I can help with, when the Marshall Rogers book comes out, if you want to hit me with a press release or something, feel free. I'll be sure to link out to whatever storefront you want us to drive some traffic to. But no, it's that I'd be happy to help out wherever I can.
Well, I appreciate that very much. It's been great. Enjoyed talking with you.
All right. Well, thank you for doing it. Everybody in the chat, thank you for hanging out with us tonight. 61 people here. Remember to hit the thumbs up on your way out the door, and we appreciate you hanging out with us this evening. And we'll see you again soon sometime, I believe.